Welcome to Purpose 360. And today I have a guest who I had the wonderful opportunity to listen to his presentation at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation annual meeting last October in Washington, D.C. And I was so touched by this approach about a construction approach and a way to work with communities. That Brendan, you might remember it. I ran up to you and I said, Brendan, I want to have you on the show. And you probably thought I was like, what? What's going on? So welcome to the show, Brendan McCluskey, president of Trident Builders.
Hi, Carol. Thank you for having us. I'm flattered to be on this presentation with you. And that's pretty much how it struck me when you came rushing up. You're like, I need to have you on this show. And you were, offering an awful lot of flattery about the presentation, which thankfully, thank you very much. But it was also so very awkward. It was like, I'm just trying to solve a problem here. And, but I appreciate the kind words.
Well, we're going to have a great conversation about dealing with key community problems regarding housing and poverty and jobs and women and small businesses and how organizations can work together in a unique model that supports your purpose. And I love on your website that you say that Trident constructs buildings as a matter of practice, but helps build communities with equal dedication.
Absolutely.
So as we start, talk a little bit about who is Brendan McCluskey, a little bit about your background, and then we're going to start getting into the depth of our conversation.
All right, fantastic. Well, again, thank you, Carol. My name is Brendan McCluskey. I'm the founder of Trident Builders. We are a commercial general contractor located in Baltimore, Maryland. We do work that really kind of spans the spectrum. Federal work, private sector work, a lot of very technically sophisticated projects, and doing an awful lot of design assist or design build work, where we kind of are helping shape the vision of the project based upon the business functions and performance requirements of it, or it's or the performance side of things. I've been very blessed to work with some of the best construction and development firms in the country. I started my career in the base building division of HIT Contracting, which is a multi-billion-dollar national construction firm. It was building high rises and skyscrapers and biotech campuses with them. From there, I did a stint in multifamily. And then I worked for the related companies out in Colorado, doing 5-star amenities on top of Snowmass Mountain. I just really benefited from working for some very sophisticated subcontractors. General contractors and developers. In 2015, I decided that it was time for me to strike it out on my own, and I founded Trident Builders. Again, to be just a commercial general contractor here in the great city of Baltimore. And it's been an interesting experience. I can tell you that it's been a slog. It's been interesting, but I think that over time, I spent more and more time looking at the problems that Baltimore City had in cities like Baltimore, and thought that really, what does it mean to be a builder? Why am I doing this? And why are we in business? And what sort of positive change can we affect in the world that we see? How can we be that agent of change? And that's what we do.
And so I always love to ask my guests, was there something in your upbringing from your mother, your father, your family that contributed to your exploration and then actual work that is beyond building a structure, but it's building community as well?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. I was blessed to have two great parents, high school sweethearts from Massachusetts, right? And we were a Navy family. So, we kind of bounced around the world, and that's how we ended up in the Annapolis area. That's where I would, say has become my adopted home. Hmm. And, one of the things that you learn in an Irish Catholic Navy family is that it's your fault and it's your responsibility to fix the problem. Okay. And just having a resolutely focused on figuring out what the solution is to anything. If there's a problem, it's your responsibility to figure it out. And I feel as if those are qualities that I definitely absorbed from my father, who was a captain in the Navy.
Oh, nice. And anything special from your mother?
To be kind. I definitely would say that my mother, there was a degree of kindness and, and tenderness that my mother offered, and just like, and being appreciative of like how the other half might live, like, again, having the opportunity to be a kid living overseas and like seeing how people in other countries are growing and some of the challenges that they're grappling with was a humbling experience as youth. And so I think my mom was quick to point out how lucky and blessed that I am.
So you've taken that, I think, depth of heart and commitment to Baltimore. And so why are you so fiercely proud of Baltimore?
I'm very bullish on Baltimore. I mean, like, it's a phenomenal city and it has just tremendous assets. It's got incredible like intellectual and financial capital, right? It's got a great legacy, especially within the industry. It has been so critical in the formation and the growth of like this, economic juggernaut that we call the United States. Like a lot of people don't realize that like the rail system was founded here, right? We are the westernmost port on the East Coast. We have just tremendous amount of assets, and we really were like the opening window for the Industrial Revolution here in the United States. And it's got so many things going for it. It's in an exceptionally wealthy state, an exceptionally well-educated state, but the concentration of poverty is just something that just can't be overlooked. And I really feel as if Baltimore is like the one city on the East Coast that really hasn't figured out its second act yet. And I think that we're on the precipice of doing so.
So you were founded in 2015, and in the beginning you were just doing general construction and such. I don't think that you were quite into the community development that you're in. You've said that you were chasing dollars early on, trying to keep the lights on. But then, what did that time begin to teach you about? There's a difference between revenue and creating sustainable systems.
No, that's a great question. So I quit my job on April Fool's Day, 2015. And,
Okay.
it was, the verdict was out for several years, whether or not this was a good idea or not. But that same month, though, Baltimore was actually hit with quite a tragedy. So, I quit my job on the 1st. All right. So my last day was like 2 weeks later. So it was really Monday, the 13th, that I started up business operations. That was quite a fateful week here in Maryland, and in Baltimore in particular, because that was the week that Freddie Gray got arrested and then died.
Mm.
When I started my company, I had an eyeball at about $6 million worth of opportunity, with the humble expectation that if I captured, say, 2 million of it as a first year startup, I would be, like smooth sailing. All of it vaporized, right, in the aftermath of Freddie Gray. And so all of a sudden, and I didn't have any sort of disdain about what was going on in Baltimore. It was just a really frustrating situation that I had to very quickly learn to get out there and, find new work. Right. And also by being entrepreneurial in a startup, it's pretty gritty. So I had to learn how to hunt, kill, cook, and clean all on my own very, very quickly. And had to do it with all new client acquisitions, like things that I had not kind of cultivated before I made my exit. I had to do from scratch. And that made for a very, very hard first few years. In the first couple of years, because I had been so blessed to build all kinds of different things, I really had the ability to kind of build anything. But what I found was that there was a challenge there in terms of lacking specialization and optimization, right, within the state market sector, that margins were often compressed as a result of that. So what I've really kind of learned in the last 10 years that it's really about focusing on where can you develop a sustainable competitive advantage? Like where can you just outshine over your competitors? And then how do you do that and maximize margin? It's not necessarily about maximizing revenue. It's about maximizing margin.
So that's a great lead into, you were part of Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses. And when did you go through that? And did that experience help you to begin to like focus on specialization where you could build reputation, capability, and margin?
100%. Yeah. It was a transformative experience. So it's kind of funny. So just about 2 years into running Trident Builders, right? And the house is on fire. Like we're negative $300,000 in equity. My wife and I are just terrified. Like we feel like we're on the precipice every day. Well, just so happens that a neighborhood coordinator for a multi-billion-dollar development in my same zip code, right, called me up one day. Her name is Alicia Wilson. She's now an executive over at Johns Hopkins. She did a stint at JP Morgan Chase there for a bit in their global philanthropy arm. Anyway, she calls me up. This is years ago. So this is 2017. She calls me up and she goes, Brendan, we really want you to apply to this business training program. So you have to appreciate that at this point, I had a business undergrad, had an MBA from the University of Massachusetts, and I had worked for some of the best construction and development firms in the country. All right. The last thing I thought that I needed to do was spend more time in the classroom. That being said, when a multi-billion-dollar developer calls up a contractor and says, hey, we want you to do this program, you kind of say, okay, I guess we're in for it. So I actually went through the cohort 1 of the Goldman Sachs program here in Baltimore. And here in Baltimore, it's actually somewhat unique in that it's actually a collaboration, not just with Goldman Sachs, but also with Bloomberg Philanthropies. Because Mike Bloomberg went to Hopkins, has been very, very generous down here. And again, equally committed to figuring out how do we use the power of like small business and enterprise to start transforming positive change in a place like Baltimore. So anyway, I went through the program, kind of begrudgingly, thinking that like this is a waste of time. I got to go put out the fires out in the business, and I couldn't have been any more wrong. What it afforded me the ability to do is to start thinking strategically again. So when any small business that is struggling, right? Sometimes you can feel like you're in a tactical firefight and you're just like trying to survive the day. You're trying to figure out how am I going to make payroll? How am I going to pay this? How am I going to do that? The program basically forces everybody to kind of look underneath the hood of their business and identify what's working well and what's not working well. Some people akin it to like a mini MBA. It isn't. It's actually much better than that. And it's really kind of a scaling program for high potential growth companies. And for me, again, it allowed me the space. Like I knew how to read financial statements. I knew how to, execute in the field and actually the services very, very well. I had enough background in HR and everything else. Like we were fine. It forced me to do is take a step back. It's like, okay, what are we really good at? What are we not so good at? What are we making money at? Let's do more of the latter and less of the things that we're struggling on. And I think that's what we were able to do. So it gave me the space to kind of focus on, what we were doing in terms of business. And what I had identified, and this is in 17, late 17, I identified that although we were diversified in our client types, like we were doing hospitality work, we were doing multifamily, we were doing commercial office, that if we hit another rough patch like we did in 08, 09, right, that I really wasn't all that diversified. Like I was still somewhat like exposed to the commercial sector market. So being located in Maryland, the natural thing to look at would be the federal government because it's such a big service provider. It's a huge part of the economic engine that is Maryland. So it's like, okay, like it would be crazy for me not to figure out where I could participate in the market. And there's a lot of like set-asides and programs that I didn't qualify for, but there's one group in particular that I thought that I could excel in that required exceptionally highly technical work and what I would call an enhanced level of engagement, right? So we had done work at the Ritz-Carlton and with Chris Steakhouses, people that are like Class A service providers, and we really excelled at that high end. So who was a high performance group within the government that we could provide services to? We got in there, and honestly, it transformed our company. And since then, I've been really constantly reapplying where can I affect positive change? Where can I be strategic and just have an outsized impact based upon what it is we're already doing? And that kind of led to the white paper and the presentation that we met over.
That's a perfect bridge to the presentation that you made in DC at the Chamber. So I'd love you to talk about the entire initiative, like, how it started. You probably had a eureka. I want to do this. I'm going to solve these problems and really talk about the depth. So first of all, I've seen different names of this initiative. So is there a formal name for this initiative?
Now we're calling it the Be More Co-op, right?
Okay, Be More Co-op.
Because it's actually a real entity. So it's funny, like the genesis of this really kind of started in the fall of 2019. I had been invited to the Bloomberg School of Public Health to go to a workforce development program. And it was just funny because on my way, as I was driving over, I had two fateful phone calls. One with a friend of mine through the Urban Land Institute who had been asking me about modular construction. And me being like the construction nerd that I am, I did some reading and research on it. And like I was, talking to her about, the benefits and the shortfalls of modular construction. Then I had a phone call from a developer client of mine that was interested in like a lease to own program called the Cleveland Housing Network that Enterprise was doing in Cleveland, where it was helping people escape the cycle of rentals and low-income housing tax credits. It was basically graduating them into home ownership. Okay, so those are two phone calls, and then I literally walk into a room at the Bloomberg School of Public Health thinking that we're going to be talking about apprenticeship programs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we were talking about anything but. We were talking about food insecurity, housing insecurity, transportation issues, trauma, criminal justice, like all these things that these young men in particular, but also women, get kind of knocked off the rails and like basically are prevented from being able to pursue good opportunities to be able to provide for themselves. So like there's a lot of like risk and adversity to these kids. Like right or wrong, I'm not being politically agnostic or one or the other. It's just like these are factual realities that these kids are having to navigate. And in the course of that meeting, I was just kind of like thinking of it, and it looked more and more like a football play, right? There's no Superman or a Wonder Woman that's going to solve poverty in Baltimore, right? But me as Trident Builders, right? I can cover the left side like a linebacker, right? I can tackle housing insecurity and workforce development. Other people can figure out other small business sort of activities to address other sort of issues. And like we just need to work in tandem in communication. And so what kind of stemmed from that was a growth of it, right? It was an expansion because again, this is fall of 2019, right?
Right.
I got into government work right in that fall. I told all my hotel and restaurant clients that I'll call you in 6 months, right? Yeah. So you know where this is going.
Yeah, it's going right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I was really, really lucky to basically shed all my clients that would not have paid their bills. I was good, steady work in the government space, but I had started really sort of like working and researching and thinking about these problems that, the city of Baltimore has. And so what ended up happening was, we started like working to scale a solution that addressed the vacants, but also kind of help spur the investment and the capture of a nascent industry and help scale modular construction, but also doing it in a way that was thoughtful regarding like energy needs, as well as workforce development programs and everything else. And that's really what the presentation was about. So should I kind of do like an abridged version of the presentation in terms of what it is?
I'm going to ask you questions on that, but I want to but what you did is that you were open. You have a brain that connection makes. And I love that you said, you went to Johns Hopkins to that meeting and you had those two phone calls, and then all of a sudden you're being exposed to new things, food insecurity. You were being exposed to social determinants of health, basically. And so let's just now talk about your process. And I want to start with vacants because I don't think our listeners know what a vacant is. Mm-hmm. And so let's just start with there's communities, subcommunities in Baltimore that are really in trouble, and you call them a vacant. So explain what a vacant is, and then how you decided where you would work, who you would work with. You have these 5 problems that you wanted to solve, but let's start with vacants.
Okay, yeah. So a vacant is basically the remnants of a house that is no longer habitable, right? So Baltimore grew very, very rapidly in the late 19th and early 20th centuries as like the industrial boom was happening. These houses were built to support that industrial worker base, right? So these are, 16-foot wide, 45-foot deep, red brick homes. They're literally just row homes next to each other. They were, a lot of them were built without any sort of material science in them. So these are houses that have kind of deteriorated over the last 100 years. So they don't have, we find like oyster shells and horsehair in like the mortar mix, right? These houses lack really any sort of insulation for the most part. And basically what ends up happening is, they're houses that were built very cheaply 100 years ago, and they're frankly falling apart. I mean, they just, they don't have like longevity to be a home that can last another century or two. Some of them can be restored, and I do believe in that. I believe in historic preservation where it makes sense. But again, I think a lot of what it is we're dealing with is the legacy of our industrial past. And we have all this housing stock that is falling apart and honestly is directly a contributor to poor health outcomes for its residents. I mean, these houses are literally killing people. Never mind that they're burning down, but like the existence of these houses basically suppress socioeconomic opportunity in these neighborhoods. And and once they become uninhabited, they become vectors for criminal activity, particularly the drug trade. So, these houses are literally like a cancer in the city. And if we don't address the houses, we're not going to be able to let Baltimore thrive to its full potential.
Okay, so you've got the vacants and what the vacants are causing criminality, health issues, a total decay of regions and pockets within Baltimore.
Well, and
So,
it's vast. So there's at least the official count is around 13,000 of these things are in the
mhm,
city, but then
right.
there's also over 20,000 vacant lots where there was a vacant house that we've knocked it over, right? So it's
Okay.
just an open lot. So I mean, you're thinking about almost 40,000 housing units within Baltimore City alone, and
hmm
the number might be a little bit conservative. It might be a little bit higher than that in totality. That like we've got to address.
So, okay, so talk about your model. So there are five problems in your presentation that you talked about. One, you're going to deal with the vacants, but there's other parts and problems. So talk about you're knocking each one of those off to create an ecosystem, a whole new way of building housing that is affordable and accessible.
Absolutely. So it does start with a vacant. So again, we have this vast number of vacants, right? And we have a math problem. We can't spend $300,000 to $400,000 renovating one of these houses and baiting like the lead and the asbestos and getting the energy efficiency performance to where it needs to be to survive a hotter century to come. And then have it only worth 250 at the end, right? So I've been resolutely focused on where is there potential innovation for my industry. And that actually bodes to another problem is that my industry is actually regressing in terms of our relative productivity. Yeah, per McKinsey and even like The Economist, our industry is less efficient and productive now than it was in 1968. And it's kind of an astounding statement to make when you think about like how the advent of information technology has transformed just about everything. But between the regulatory environment, an aging workforce, and then higher performance requirements, we just can't produce and be as productive as we were, half a century ago. So with respect to the various problems, we're focused on housing and how do we basically bridge the gap between modular building construction and then the smaller scale developers within these neighborhoods. Because like we got to do something different. Like, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different outcome is the
Right.
definition of insanity, right? Well,
Right.
that's kind of what we're doing here in Baltimore. We just keep on throwing money at these houses and like the math is never going to work out. And so what I've been really kind of resolutely focused on is like, how do we start doing this in a way that helps us scale the industrial capacity to make modular more cost effective than conventional construction, and then do that in an open and equitable way. And the way to do that is honestly be open source. So like, a lot of people could be somewhat stingy, right? And like hoard their knowledge and their know-how. And I'm just looking at the size and the scale of the problem and like, this is way too big for even just Trident Builders. So like,
hmm
how do we do this in a way that makes sure that even my competitors, as low as I want to say that out loud, how
hmm
can I empower them to do this in a way that they're also successful? It's both practical and pragmatic to take that sort of approach because again, the size and scale of the problem is way larger than Trident Builders can handle on their own. It needs to be done faster than that.
hmm
But I also need to make sure that like my competitors don't mess it up because if they're
okay.
right,
Right.
well, because like I mean, if
Right.
the margin for error in high performance housing, like there could be bad outcomes. And my concern is that if people are out there like jokers really and like getting this all messed up, it could put a
hmm
stink on what it is we're trying to do and make it harder. And like I really want to make sure that we're doing this in an open source and equitable way that basically reduces risk to everybody involved and
hmm
encourages adoption.
And I love you're talking a lot of emphasis on equity because one of your elements, your key audiences to make this work are small scale developers. And you say that many of them are either people of color or women. So you're providing opportunities for their businesses to grow. That was one audience that was really important. And then I want you to talk about unemployed youth
Okay.
because you say that, because they're not educated enough or skilled enough to go into an apprenticeship, but as I think you said in your speech, they're all over. They're sitting on stoops. They're getting into trouble or whatever. So how did you like have that aha moment? Let's get these unemployed youth. Let's train them and give them an opportunity for a future.
Yeah, absolutely. So first, start with the smaller scale developers. Again, it's pragmatism, Carol. Right? I mean, yes, it's the right thing to do, but it's also like the right thing to do in terms of like execution. A
Mm,
lot of these communities have women-based community leaders in them. right? And they're the ones that are spearheading the development efforts. They know an awful lot. One of my clients is a PhD. She's brilliant, they know very little about real estate development and construction. And this is where they get into trouble because they sometimes come across contractors that might not necessarily have like their best interests at heart and not necessarily be as mission-centric as the Trident Builders. So these are minority developers, predominantly women, that have site control of like housing assets within these communities. They're from the communities. They live in the communities. They're trusted by the communities, right? These communities are somewhat cagey, right? They've been like taken advantage of time and time again by any number of people. So it's really hard for a guy like me to kind of come in there and be like, oh, I'm going to redevelop this community for you. By empowering them, we're building at a scale that neighborhood can absorb, but then we're also keeping the wealth in that community, right? Like I'm not kind of coming in as the developer and then extracting the wealth through new housing construction. We're literally imparting wealth into that community and investment into that community for that community. But it goes hand in hand with like the workers, right? So you can't rebuild a neighborhood without rebuilding the neighbors themselves, right? Like, who's going to live in this new house?
Wait. You can't rebuild a neighborhood without rebuilding the neighbors themselves.
That is correct.
I just want our listeners to like just take a pause. That's incredibly profound. And I also think, Brendan, the fact that you recognized you can't be that, dare I say, white developer coming in to save, the neighborhood, and that you empowered, that you found other small business people who wanted to do good, and that you would collaborate with them to help make sure that they weren't taken advantage of, and that you could impart your vision and actually just skills to them. I think that's incredibly powerful. I just keep thinking, and I'm so glad I asked the question about your parents and what they taught you. And this note about your mother taught you to be kind. I think that is so profound. So, okay, continue with the story.
Yeah. It actually kind of speaks to our family's like three rules. So my grandfather was the first one born in this country, and out in Montana of all places, but we came back to Boston. Yeah. And we call them Baba's three rules, right? And it's like show up, work hard, and be nice. Those are the three things.
Oh, it's great. Show up, work hard, and be nice.
It doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. And so, and my father, he did a lot of interesting things in his career, but one of the things that he was probably most successful at is he was a technology integrator and forecaster within the military community. So again, like I might come by technological integration naturally, right? Like how do you connect the dots between like various technologies and make it work? Again, I'm really kind of coming from like more of an engineer's mind on like how do you solve these problems? Like what are the actual drivers of like these sort of problems and issues? And like, what are the root causes and drill down on that? Like, never mind the noise, focus on the problem.
Great. So talk about the unemployed youth, because you have when you talk about it and you look at your website, you have a really deep commitment to helping youth get off the stoop and to have a future.
Yeah. Well, especially here in Baltimore, like we have a sick irony. We have a shortage of construction workers, but then we have all these underemployed youth. And like these underemployed youth have been failed by institutions their entire lives, right? Chief among them, probably the schools. And they don't have the academic rigor to get past the apprenticeship programs. Now, this is where it gets a little bit convoluted. So apprenticeship programs in the construction industry are usually focused on the skilled trades. So electrical, plumbing, HVAC, fire sprinkler. And those are kind of dictated by a combination of basically like open job as well as union sort of like labor negotiations and like what the definition of what those programs look like. Mm-hmm. There's a middle gap that we're missing. All right. And that is the semi-skilled laborer, right? And that's
semi-skilled. Yeah.
Well, and trust me, a drywall finisher that is good is worth his weight in gold, right? But like for whatever reason, we don't call them a skilled laborer, we call them semi-skilled. And what we have a shortage of is those workers. So the average age of a construction worker in this country right now is like 43 years old. 1 in 4 construction workers is over the age of 55. So we actually have a demographic like crisis that no one's really talking about. At the same time, we have all these underemployed youth in a city like Baltimore. And so, I was at the corner of President and Pratt Street, which is on the Inner Harbor. I was standing there with a representative from Blue Fifth Philanthropies and a nonprofit leader named Joni, great friend of mine. We're just sitting there having a conversation, and like right across the street, like you see all these squeegee kids doing this motion with like the squeegee things, right? And these squeegee kids do get in trouble. There was a shooting here downtown a few years ago. It's been a really contentious political issue here. But I'm just sitting there looking at Joni and like, that kid is making the exact same motion as the drywall finisher. All right.
Oh, you see, you're a connection maker. Your brain is great. It makes those connections.
Well, thank you. But it's just that kid would be making $27 an hour plus fringe on a government job, right? So why is he hustling on the corner? Now, granted, there's other competing situations, and these kids have a lot of other life factors that we can't explore everything here. But that's where I kind of became resolutely focused working with Joni and other partners like her, in which we it's like, no, we got to figure out ways to start like funneling these kids back into the formal economy, and that's what we've been doing.
That's great. So, and you actually, I love to quote you. You say that these kids, if they don't have an opportunity, they express their fear with anger, and that's where you have perhaps some street fights, or we might have fires or other things. So it's great that you're that you're providing an opportunity. Talk a little bit about working with a modular manufacturer, because that was a problem. They want to work on a large scale, but you were working on a small scale. How did you get over that barrier?
Well, it was great because like the factory that we were working with most closely is a group called Blueprint Robotics. And you got to leave it to the Germans. It's German technology. You got to leave it to the Germans to over-engineer something, right? But they have a whiz-bang product, and like it's really, really fantastic. But the thing is with that, like anything in a factory, right? Like you need to achieve certain degrees of economies of scale. And you can't do that doing 4, 5, 10 units at a time. Like you really have to make the metrics work, where you start to beat out on the conventional construction model. You need to start getting into 30, 40, 50 units at a time. And what we decided to do is we started thinking about all of these smaller scale developers that are scattered all over the city. What if we could crowdsource their aggregate demand to hit that threshold? So all of a sudden, like they start achieving like the buying power in aggregate. And so that idea basically led right into the next one, which is be more co-op, right? So I wrote the white paper and I discussed the idea of like the best way for us to do this is to crowdsource all this and let's create that cooperative. Well, like that co-op now is a real entity, and I founded it last August with a professor at Hopkins, as well as some other for-profit and nonprofit developers, all alumni from the Goldman Sachs program. And there's a lot of interesting things that are happening very, very quickly.
Oh, that's great. I'm curious. How do you select the right partners for collaboration? I mean, yes, you had you had some buds that you met at the Goldman Sachs program, but you're working with a lot of other different organizations. How collaboration is key. Collaboration is so important, especially for improving our communities. How do you choose the right ones?
I've been working with the Carey School of Business at Johns Hopkins in a think tank called like the Be More Collab, where you had a lot of like mission-centric people, a lot of these ideal sort of developer customers of mine were in the meeting. And listening, I think, was really important. And like what was interesting was that there's a lot of people here that care an awful lot about these problems, but there's a lot of people that are thinking with their hearts and not necessarily with their heads. And what I started identifying is like, all right, who are the people that are serious, that understand that this needs to be a market-driven solution? It needs to be scalable. And slowly but surely, we started like reaching out and having conversations. And we found out that there was an awful lot of alignment, maybe not perfect, maybe we don't agree on everything, but like there was enough alignment for us to collaborate. It made an awful lot of sense. And like, that's really how we zeroed in on this small group. And I really did focus on the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program, simply because of a few things. One, these individuals have already been vetted by a world-class organization like Goldman Sachs. Two, they've got a modicum of phenomenal business education by virtue of going through the program. So I know that like they should know better in terms of business decisions, depending upon when we have issues, right? And then lastly, we're kind of like a family, like I think when you're a small business owner, it's kind of lonely. Like, you don't have too many peers. And I feel as if like the Goldman Sachs program has done a phenomenal job of building like a national peer group. And we kind of rely and trust on each other, and we don't really ever want to go against the family.
Great, great. So, okay, all right. So you dealt with the modular issue. That was a big challenge. You're dealing with great partners, so you're learning there. One of the things about partners is that we wrote a book called Breakthrough Not-for-Profit Branding, and I think the best part of that book was that when you have a for-profit and a not-for-profit, we always talk about goals. So it's like, what is my goal, which are the not-for-profit? What are the goals of the for-profit? And then the magic is in the shared goals. And
Yes.
so that's exactly what you said. I would like to have you just a little bit of a pivot to explain what does a starter house look like? You're creating these starter homes. What's the size? What's in them, et cetera, that you're very, very proud of?
Yeah, absolutely. So a starter home is the home that you would think that a young newlywed couple or people just getting started out have the ability to, move into and start a family
Hmm.
with. So these houses are a little bit more modest than your McMansion, right? They're going to be, 1,500 square feet, 2, 3, 4 bedrooms at most. Again, they're smaller, they're more humble, but they represent dignity. Like it's a dignified house, it's a quality house. And that is sorely absent from the market. Basically, home builders have not been building this type of housing for almost 30 years.
Mm,
And we have a couple national crises, but chief among them in terms of like the affordability debate is housing affordability. I was reading a report that Goldman Sachs sent me yesterday that, our housing is almost like a third more or fourth more expensive than it was even 15 years ago
mm,
in terms of ratios and like the percentage of net income. It's costing like most families upwards of 33% of their net income
right.
for housing. Okay. And that's average. If you look at like the lower 40%, it's more like
Hmm.
55 to
Oh,
60%
that's a lot.
for a
So
house.
we have not talked about one of the magical elements, solar. So, can you talk about how you're using solar and how it's generating income? Because, and also how it creates longevity, because I think that that is another genius part of your solution.
Okay, fantastic. Well, so this is where it gets interesting. So the modular construction allows us to build a very high performance building envelope, literally the outside walls. That's where we win the battle between energy efficiency. So first, we're building a new house, a quality house that is hyper energy efficient, that reduces the operation expenses of like an energy bill for these families of modest means, right? What we discovered at the Smithsonian was that when we put solar panels on them, these houses were producing over 200% of the power they were using day or night, 365. So in order for it to be producing that much power, right, it's not producing anything in the middle of the night. That means that it is crushing electrical generation during peak load times in the hot summer afternoons. That's when the grid is working the hardest. Your energy bills are the highest, and all of it. And then it's actually when we as a society are emitting the most carbon because the way that the utilities are meeting that peak demand is they're firing up emergency generator natural gas turbines all over the place. And so what we were seeing was like, okay, these houses can produce a lot of energy when energy is the
Mhm.
most expensive. How do we harness this? And like, there's a lot of nuance to why solar has not been widely adopted within these communities. Like just call it what it is. Solar developers back in the day were somewhat predatory. So a lot of people have like a bad taste when it comes to solar about, leases and how they get hogtied into like these roof subleases. What we basically determined is like we build a new house. That house is going to have a roof that's going to be good for 15 to 20 years. It just so happens that solar panels are good for 15 to 20 years. So what we're doing is we're basically optimizing the roof to be leased to third-party solar developers that are responsible for the roof. So a vacant becomes a vacant because these families of modest means can't afford to replace the roof when it starts to go. So
Right.
we're giving them a new house with a new roof. We're bringing on a lease for a solar developer to put solar panels on top of it. These leases have options to renew. And basically, the provision within that lease is going to require the solar developer to replace the roof at that time, right? In the event that the solar developer doesn't want to renew the lease and like do the capital investment, it's fine. We even set aside an escrow, a royalty, like a portion of the proceeds of the leasing to basically allow for the roof's replacement. But the beautiful thing is that I have, knowing with what energy trends are looking like, any sort of generation
Yeah.
capacity you bring online, it's not going offline, right? It's going to be even worth even more down the road. So what ends up happening is that rainy day fund or that emergency reserve to replace that
Mm-hmm.
roof when it needs to in 15 to 20 years, then becomes a windfall event for that family. And so you inadvertently are starting to close the social wealth gap just by virtue of the sun shining.
I love it. That again, it's another part of your brilliant. It's like putting all these different layers and components together to really create a breakthrough solution. Can you talk about one or two of your new projects? You've got one I think that's creating 100 units that's coming up,
Oh,
and
so
then you're
I'm
yeah.
again, like this white paper was the best dumb bet I've ever done in my entire life. Right.
Okay.
So yeah, we've got a couple of good projects moving forward. So the first one is the one that we've broken ground on, right? We poured foundations right before all the snow landed here, and we're going through some minor tweaks of design and whatnot. But we will be going vertical
Mm-hmm.
in March with the panelized structure, and like we will have this project done before Memorial Day.
Wow.
And that is a duplex unit, and then there's a 6-unit apartment building behind it, like a mini, like the missing middle, which is enough. We can go down a rabbit hole and talking about like different types of housing that are missing from the marketplace that are needed.
Yep.
The next project that we have in design that we hope to break ground on by this summer is kind of interesting. So you can't spend $400,000 building a new housing unit and only have it worth $250,000. But you can build two housing units, one worth $150,000 and the other one worth $250,000 to meet the $400,000. And that's exactly what we're doing. So we have a 3-story row home, something that is ubiquitous in Baltimore that everyone would recognize and be comfortable with seeing. The first floor is designed for the elderly and the and the disabled in mind. So it's going to be ADA ready, if not compliant. And that will allow like a sorely missing part of the housing market for the elderly, which is a growing demographic that we need a lot of housing for, to allow them to age in place longer. So it defers like a lot of the end of life costs and assisted living and whatnot as long as we possibly can. The upper 2 floors are designed for a working class family. Now, this family could be all related to each other. It could be 2 separate families. We're agnostic to it. Like the idea is to allow the market to do what the market wants to do, right? Let the market operate freely. Again, I'm very much a free market believer, right? And but I believe that we need to bring better products to the free market than what we're currently doing. And then lastly, what's really cool is the Tivoli Eco Village, which we've been awarded pre-construction on. So that's 100 units.
Nice.
So that's a whole neighborhood development. And what's cool about that is that it's going to be incorporating microgrid technology. So on top of solar, we're going to be doing battery backup storage and other sort of resiliency sort of technologies. Why that's important is that our national grid is also under huge strain and growth demand, right? I mean, I've been pretty vocal about how aggressive our year over year growth of energy generation demand and capacity is doubling every year right now. So what we're doing is we're basically building a small neighborhood that is going to be resilient. So if there was ever a catastrophic failure of the grid, this little neighborhood would access an oasis within Baltimore, right? But the thing is, we want to build everything like this. We want to build
Beautiful.
Yeah, a whole patchwork. And this is how you engineer resiliency into the grid for the 21st century.
That's amazing. So you talked about, you opened up the conversation about open source. So you're sharing your approach with others. So what do you think in terms of you're doing this incredible work, some others doing it? What's Baltimore going to look like in terms of its housing in 10 years? What do you hope it's going to look like?
So 2 points to that. So you've been very kind and you're giving me a lot of compliments, right, regarding the idea and whatnot. But if I can be truthful, Carol, right,
Mm-hmm.
I feel as if it's not a solution that I came up with as an idea. I feel as if it's a solution that I saw, right?
Okay.
And as a result of it, I feel as if it's my obligation to share it. Does that make sense? Right? It's coming from a different, perspective of driver, right? And I feel as if this is the solution, this is the problem. I need to share this with other people, and that's why I'm doing it open source.
I don't know if you know the company Interface, but they made carpets for office buildings. And Ray Anderson, their founder, unfortunately, he's passed. But his people came to him and said, what happens with these carpets when they wear out? You throw them into landfills. And then they started talking to him about sustainability. And ultimately, the company created tiles, the modular tiles made from recycled materials so that the entire business became a sustainable business. He saw a problem like you did, and then he had the wherewithal to come up with a solution. So I want to give you the credit back because I think, and also the fact that, I guess you said your grandfather said show up, work hard, and be nice, and your mom said be kind. And I think that that's become something where you feel that you need to share this with others so they can have a better life too. So kudos for you. I'm curious about what advice would you give to young people who want to go into construction, but they want to go into sustainable construction?
That's a great question. So, young people that want to go into construction, definitely focus on like the engineering degrees, but it's not necessary. Like, me personally, I changed my major 7 times as an undergrad. I
Okay,
studied
good to know.
everything other than
Yeah,
engineering, and then,
yeah.
but here we are. You know, learn as much as you possibly can, because again, like where I think the real places of innovation and where I think the industry is going is the human mind's ability to connect dots across various disciplines. I think that's where I think the greatest degree of like innovation, like we're going to see moving forward in construction and really across the economy, is our ability to connect dots from things that seem very disconnected.
Mm.
And again, I would be humble, get out there, get dirty, and just be open minded.
Okay. And are you using AI in terms of? I know that you're a data gatherer because you want to share it with others. Are you using AI in your work?
We are, and that was actually my second most interesting phone call today. This, of course, being the first. This morning we had a third phone call with Johns Hopkins. So I got to be somewhat cagey about it because I'm underneath a NDA. But
Okay.
we are basically aggregating all this data, right? So one of the beautiful things that we're doing with this modular housing construction, like we build a lot of different things, and it's all over the place. The quality of the design's all over the place. We're building the same thing over and over again, right? And so what we're doing is we're basically putting in our systems and our practices with
Yeah.
artificial intelligence to do, like, again, 100, 200 of the same thing over and over. It's really ideal for machine learning. So what we're basically looking to do is basically engineer up a
Great.
virtual project management agent and or superintendent agent.
Oh, great.
Right. What we'll do is it will drive all sorts of efficiencies and
Hmm.
productivity issues and basically minimize what I would call cost leakage that happens on the job site through lack of
Yeah.
communication and documentation. And so, yes, are we using AI? Very, very slowly, but we're working, like Hopkins had developed all these agent tools for the medical industry, and now we're
Right.
repurposing them for construction.
Fabulous. Okay. When you can announce it, we'll do an update. We'll
I
invite you
love it.
back. Invite you back. So we like to end our show with some fast answers, really brief. So we're going to put you through these. So what's the one word that best describes the Baltimore you're working to help build? One word.
Resolve.
Resolve. Okay. What keeps you hopeful on the days this work feels really hard?
There's not a day that doesn't feel really hard.
Okay.
Hope is the only thing that's getting me through it.
Okay. What's one lesson Baltimore has taught you about resilience or community that you couldn't have learned anywhere else?
I think I described like how it was hard getting started and how I kind of got 2 black eyes and a bloody nose in this first couple of years, right? But walking around these neighborhoods, you see how much harder some of these communities have faced than any of the like minor tribulations that I faced with. So, maybe it's the Catholicism rubbing off again, where it's like just show about your problems and focus on helping somebody else.
That's wonderful. What's one small action people can take to make their communities more equitable today?
Examine what your skill sets are and just find somewhere where you can help just a person. And it can be a complete stranger. In fact, sometimes those are the best people to help.
Okay. And if you could leave our listeners with one idea or feeling today of what we discussed, what would it be?
Carol, and to be perfectly honest with you, like, don't get me wrong, I sometimes feel as if like I'm a Don Quixote out here. Like I feel as if I'm a crazy bitch, like trying to like tackle climate change, housing, poverty, energy, all of it, right? And like, if one's ego could make them concerned that they're going to look foolish. Who cares, right? Like who really cares? Like get out there, roll up your sleeves, and just work a problem. Like, just don't let pride get in your way. Like, just focus on what is the right thing to do, and how can you be the change that you want to see in the world.
That's beautiful. So I always love to give the last word to our guest. And you've had phenomenal insights and sharing with great humility, Brendan. What would you like to leave our listeners with?
You know, you only get what you give.
You only get what you give. Brilliant, wonderful, heartfelt, humble. I want to thank you. I am so thrilled. I mean, when I first heard the story, but just having this opportunity in a longer amount of time to have the give and take, I know that our listeners will be very touched by how you connect the dots, how you're kind, how you just show up and do the work. And I am just thrilled to have you on Purpose 360. And I wish you so much best wishes to take your vision, and that others will, embrace it, and that you'll be helping to bring hope and housing and opportunity to so many people. So thank you, Brendan McCluskey.
Well, again, Carol, thank you so much for the opportunity to put a spotlight on what is this good work that we're all doing together here in Baltimore. And just so you're aware, we are bringing it to elsewhere. Like, we are very intentional about doing this in a way that we're going to share our knowledge to Chicago, to Cincinnati. These are places that have reached out to me already. So, like, once we figure this thing out, we fine tune the engine, we're going to share.
Terrific. So what I will do, and I'll make this promise, so once you do any of those other cities and you've got more learnings, come back on the show. We love to share more of your progress.
Awesome. Thank you, Carol.